they're gonna change. Still wanna keep my promises, but I'll be the one to blame. My intentions are innocent. Keep thinking that you're heaven sent. Is it too much to ask for fairy tales? Is it too blind to ask for faith? Somehow my hopes fly high and insecure. Somehow my spirit hides away. But baby, my intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're any good. Keep thinking that you're heaven sent. Don't know why your love's so cruel. My intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're gonna change. Still wanna keep my promises, but I'll be the one to blame. The sun, the sun, the My intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're gonna change. Still wanna keep my promises, but I know my heart you'll break. My intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're any good. Keep thinking that you haven't sent. Don't know why your love's so cruel. Spending time on wistful mornings, wishing I could make things right. In the end we just keep falling into pieces, losing out on sleep at night. Is it too much to ask for fairy tales? Is it too blind to ask for faith? But baby, my intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're any good. Keep thinking that you're heaven sent. Don't know why your love's so cruel. My intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're gonna change. Still wanna keep my promises, but I'll be the one to blame. My intentions are innocent. Keep thinking that you're heaven sent. Is it too much to ask for fairy tales? Is it too blind to ask for faith? Somehow my hopes fly high and insecure. Somehow my spirit hides away. But baby, my intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're any good. Keep thinking that you're heaven sent. Don't know why your love's so cruel. My intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're gonna change. Still wanna keep my promises, but I'll be the one to blame. The sun, the sun, the My intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're gonna change. Still wanna keep my promises, but I know my heart you'll break. My intentions are innocent. Don't know if they're any good. peaceful mornings, wishing I could make things right. In the end, we just keep falling into pieces, losing out on sleep at night. Is it too much to ask for fairy tales?
Check, check, check. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's dolltr. Nice to see all of you. I'm not Max, but I'm here. And we're going to do some Theory Thursday stuff today. So hi to everyone who might be tuning in. I see a couple of folks in the chat. Sodney, hi, how's it going? Hello also to Holgi. Welcome, and welcome to anyone who also might be just filtering in from other places. This is I'm not Max like I mentioned, but this is going to be the last week of 343 TV for now, for season 1, especially if you've been tuning in regularly. Thanks so much for always tuning in. And yeah, I'm just here to kind of, I guess, maybe wrap up Theory Thursday, but also bring to you a concept that one of my students earlier today was talking to me about. So I thought, wow, this is pretty serendipitous. I'll talk about it in the stream today as well. But hi to everyone who's joining in. I see a few names filtering in as well in the chat. So let's see. Numbers keep changing as always, but yay. Ooh, Scott's here too. Hi. Hi, Scott. How's it going? Nice to see you as well. Great. Cool. And let us know actually where you're tuning in from. So for example, I'm in New York. I'm in Queens. I know we usually have people like pretty internationally watching, and that's important because 343 Labs, we're both in New York and in Berlin now. Max, our co-founder, is over in Berlin running the Berlin side of our school. So he's over there hanging out. And the rest of us are over here just hanging out in New York, but kind of operating a bit remotely. That said, though, if you do want to find out more, because I think the Berlin side is launched in July. If you want to find out more info about that, you can head over to 343labs.de for the German side. And we always have lots of offerings, even online as well, for everyone across the world. I'm pretty excited about this, which maybe it's because I work very closely with it, but in September, we are bringing back the New York City Online Ableton user group, which I'm going to be hosting as well. And we're currently putting together some presenters, but hopefully there'll be a really great lineup. Actually, I know that there will be a very great lineup. It always is a really great lineup. But yeah, in the YouTube chat, if you want to let us know where you're watching in the YouTube chat, and I can check that out and see where people are tuning in from. Otherwise, today, I'm going to talk about something that always intrigued me a lot in different songs, especially if they sounded a little bit more like outside of a key. Like usually when we think about theory, we think about keys and we think about scales and we think about all these different kinds of terminology. But sometimes there are certain chords that appear outside of a key that still sound really great. And for a long time, I was wondering, like, why does that happen? And then I discovered that the more I got into researching and self-study and also learning from school, that there is something called a secondary dominant. So that's what I'm talking about today. I'm going to talk about, first of all, what it means to have a dominant chord in something. And then we're going to talk about how we create secondary dominants. But maybe let's start off by asking the YouTube chat for a suggestion of a tempo and a key. So if you can give us a tempo suggestion and if you can give us a key suggestion in the YouTube chat, that would be amazing. And I'm just going to wait for a second to see if we have anything coming through. Ooh, yes. Thank you also to Thomas, always helping us run this show. Thomas is a champ. Thank you, Thomas, for putting the RSVP link for the New York Ableton user group in September. Really excited for it. Also because it's really near my birthday. So it's almost like a pseudo birthday party for me, I think. But no, if you want to leave us a tempo suggestion and a key suggestion in the YouTube chat. Let's see what we got. And it might take a while, so maybe I'll just hang around for a second. I'm going to make sure that, maybe I'll just walk you through what I have here while I'm waiting for suggestions. In the live set that I have here, I just have a MIDI track that's loaded up and also something that I'm using to monitor my voice too. But in the meantime, I've got a piano track that's also pulled up here, and I've got my MPK Mini next to me that's going to let me play a couple of notes. And I'm also going to adjust the octave for that too. Cool. It looks like, Scott, thank you for your suggestion. It says 130 in D minor. So cool. I'm going to adjust my tempo to 130. And let's do 130 over here. And D minor. Cool. So let's make a chord progression in D minor. I think that might be nice. So to start off with, let's just start off with a D minor chord. And in a D minor chord, you're usually thinking of D, F, A as your one chord. So let's go ahead and put that in here. I'm going to I'll just directly like double click in it to form the chords here. But here's a neat tip also. So usually if I'm thinking of a chord progression, I think of it in terms of bars. And usually I like doing a lot of like 4-bar chord progressions because they kind of let you alternate between different kinds of chords and loop them around. So over here in Ableton Live, let's make a 4-bar chord progression by setting the length of this current loop to 4 bars. So I'm going to do that. Great. Now you might see that my grid over here is pretty small, and that's because it's in 16th notes. But usually for a 4-bar loop with 1 chord per bar, what I like to do is I like to set the grid to 1 bar each so that whenever I'm creating a note by double clicking, it's going to automatically be 4 bars long. So to do that, I'm going to use either Command 1 or Command 2, depending on how your grid is currently set up. Pressing on Command 2 is going to make your grid lines further away from each other so that your notes are going to be longer in length. And then Command 1 is going to do the opposite and make them smaller. So in this case, I want to use Command 1 so that I have 1 bar as my default note length that I'm going to put into live. So over here, let's do D, F, and F, not F sharp, and A. Cool. So we got a 1 chord. Let's do a 5 chord. Let's just do 1, 5. Let's do 1, 4, 5, 1 for now. So we'll do 1, and then we'll do 4, which is going to be starting on G. And you've got G, B flat, and D. And then you've got a 5 chord after that. So I usually like doing this for the 5 chord, just duplicating the 4 and bring it up. And then we have some kind of 1 chord. So let's bring that back down. So all minor chords in this case. Let's take a listen to what this sounds like. Cool. And let's also do this. Cool. Awesome. So we have this main kind of chord progression over here. Now, when we think about dominant chords, usually we're thinking about some kind of 5 chord. So a 5 chord in a key that goes to a 1 chord in the key. In this case, we kind of have that over here. So let's take a little bit of a listen to this part. What I've just done is I've grabbed the start point of the loop and dragged it over so that I'm only looping 2 bars. So I've got 5, 1. So 5 chord, 1 chord. Now, even in a lot of minor types of chord progressions, sometimes you can have a 5 chord that is not a minor chord. So if you were to play a natural minor scale, something like D minor in this case, these are all the notes that would usually appear in a D minor scale. And in this case, I guess the most crucial note for us to think about when we talk about dominant chords is this note over here, C, which is the 7th note in a major scale. But if we wanted some kind of more advanced, or not advanced, but a different sounding kind of 5 chord, you can click on this note, and if you shift it up a half step, you'll get a major 5 chord going to a minor 1 chord. So we got this. So major 5 chord going to a 1 chord. And this is something that Max has actually briefly mentioned in a couple of his other streams. So if you do want to check out the other streams that Max has done, please do. You can find them on our YouTube channel. We've got them organized in playlists. We've also got them just sprinkled around the channel in general. Some of the episodes are also hosted by me. So for example, in the previous week, we also had Scott there too. And he saw me do the previous streams as well. But yeah, so in a lot of the things that Max has done for his earlier streams, he's talked also about the differences, the fundamental differences in major chords versus minor chords. Also some creative ways that you can use them in other out of key types of situations as well. So that's just something to consider. And in this case, before I move any further, we have this major 5 to 1 chord. what I'm going to do is expand this out so that it's instead looping for 4 bars. But see if you can listen to this entire loop and maybe get used to the different sort of idea behind it. So here we go. So sounding a little bit different. If anyone's in the YouTube chat, let us know if you like this more, if you like the original version more. So this is the new version. And this was the old one. So we had shifted this C down. So a more, for me, it feels a little bit more subdued, I guess. But if this is moved up, cool. So yeah, that's like a little bit of a neat tip. I'm glad that we start with a minor key because then I get to talk about this. Usually, like I said, if you're in a minor key, your 5 chord will be a minor chord, but if you move that middle note up a half step, you're going to get some kind of major chord. So I almost feel like this is a sound that perhaps we are more familiar with in classical music. Like we might not hear it super often in a lot of like pop music nowadays, especially. But hi to Ashok. Greetings, welcome. Yeah, I liked the newer version too. I think they both sounded great, but they kind of had like a different emotion and a different quality to them. So the second version with the raised middle note in the 5th chord really gave me a little bit more of a different feeling. So I liked that a lot. And that's the principle that is in a way behind secondary dominance and dominant chord motion. So a secondary dominant, like I said, it refers to the 5 chord of the chord before this. So let's see if we can maybe dive a little bit into this theoretically speaking, and see how this could sound in this context. So if I were to, play this 5-to-1 motion, I have A going to D. So A coming down to D, going in that dominant motion. If I had to count up 5 notes from A on like a piano or something, so that was actually a Dorian scale. Whoops. If I had a D minor scale and if I needed to count up 5 notes from A, would anyone know what that note is? Anyone in the chat know what that is in the YouTube chat? If I had A and I had a D minor scale, what would 5 notes above A be? Let's see if we can get an answer in the chat. I'll wait like a minute maybe, because I do know that there's always a little bit of delay, which is, I guess, the one thing that could be cool for live streaming if there was a bit more of that immediate response. But what is a 5th above A? If we get an answer in the chat, well, unfortunately we don't have a giveaway, but I'll give you a virtual cookie, I guess, for this. Ooh, hi also to Malik. Welcome. Just saw your comment. Just joined in. But yeah, anyone know what a 5th above D or a 5th above A is? Well, here's actually a neat trick, and maybe I'll share this with you instead. So usually when I'm thinking about 5 chords, so Ashok, that's a good guess. You're actually really, really close. So Ashok guessed F, but if we have a note over here that's like, we've got this like A chord over here, and it's a major chord because, like I said, we changed the middle note. It's an A major chord. Usually, you have 1, 3, and 5 being the notes in any kind of chord if you're forming some kind of chord in a key. So A, C sharp, and E are the 3 notes that are going to form an A major chord. So in this case, a 5th above is actually E. So what I'm going to do in this case is remove this second chord, which used to be a 4 chord. Now we have this empty space, but 5 and 1. So what is a secondary dominant? Because the idea of something being secondary, we kind of think of it as on a different level, right? So in this case, what I'm going to do is make a dominant chord of A. So I'm going to form a chord starting on the 5 of A, and then have it go to the A after. So it's a little bit like working backwards. And maybe that's why secondary dominants are also a little bit trickier. But yeah, so Malik just answered it's E. Yeah, so E, let's put this up here. If you want to, everyone, also just be aware that on YouTube, if you're looking at the live stream, You can always check whether you're actually watching in real time or if you're watching a delayed version by clicking on the live button. If the live button is up in red on the lower bar of the YouTube screen, that means you are watching in real time. And if you're not, there's like a little bit of delay. So maybe that's something to check out also if I'm seeming really delayed to all of you. So that's something that I realized like halfway through streaming a couple months ago. I was like, wait, the live button is not lit up. So maybe that's why some things are a little bit out of time. But in the meantime, let's get back over here and let's start creating this. So if I had E as a starting note, then I want to create some kind of dominant chord. I need to create an E major chord. So here we go. E, G sharp, and B. There we go. E, G sharp, and B. Cool. So we've got this now. So one thing that I will say also is that maybe this sounds a little bit strange because it's kind of like, spread out a little bit in different areas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Option and we're going to do a bit of a comparison. I'm going to drop this chord down by an octave so that now we have them all a little bit in closer proximity. And let's see if this sounds a little better. Maybe it will. So really, that's what we kind of mean by a secondary dominant. In this case, this E major chord is not in the key of D minor. Because originally, if we take a look at the notes in D minor, we have D, E, F, G, A, B flat, C, and one more, D, all the way up, right? So E major is not a chord that is in the key of D minor. But in this case, because we are letting it be a secondary dominant to the A major chord that we had over here, that's why it sounds as if it maybe kind of belongs in the key. But at the same time, it creates some kind of like otherworldly sort of feeling to it. If we want it to do a direct comparison, we can try that out. So I'm going to do this here. I'm going to say version 1. I'm going to call this version 1. And in version 2 of my chord progression that I make, let's go ahead and change everything so that it's all absolutely in the key of D minor. So let's do this. Let's try this out. Here's version 1 with our secondary dominant chords. And here is version 2, which has no secondary dominant chords in them. And they're all chords that are, it's funny I use this word now, but they're all chords that are native to the key. I often talk about like native devices in live, stuff like that. But yeah, if you're in the YouTube chat with us, let me know which version you preferred, maybe version 1 or version 2. And then we kind of had our scratch place over here. But version 1 has the secondary dominant chords in them. So kind of being taken out a little bit. But version 2 is all kind of muted in a way, almost. I should also add that I think I have a different note over here. I think that's right. There we go. Cool. My brain was messing with me for a second. And that's because in the secondary dominant version of this, B and G sharp, which are in E major, in the E major chord, are both not in the key of D. So I totally forgot about that. Slipped my mind, but my ear was like, wait, that doesn't sound right. So yeah, cool. So Scott mentioned version 1. Yeah, I personally like version 1 a lot too. And you can pretty much do this for any kind of chord that you find in a specific key, but you want to do a kind of dominant resolution too. So that's something that we also think about. And that's why secondary dominant motion is really cool to play with, because you can kind of trick people with their ears a little bit to kind of mess around with them a little bit. So let's do a little bit of an experiment too. I'm going to copy over this track and we'll do like a new chord progression. So I'm going to move down and maybe put this in a new clip slot as well. And let's start off completely new. This time let's even try, what should we do? Let's go a little easy this time though. Let's do like an A minor type chord progression. So I've got A minor, I've got A, C, and E. And I've got this over here. So this is our 1 now. Let's go ahead and do some simple chord progression. So let's start again with maybe this time maybe we can do 1 something and then 4, 5. So let's see if we can do this. Let's do 1 and I'm going to copy this over here. Let's do the 4 and the 4th is going to be D, and then let's duplicate that again, bring that up. So we have this now. We have 1 something, 4, 5. So in this case, if I have a empty chord here, and there's nothing wrong with this chord progression, it does sound kind of cool, but we can figure out a way to maybe spice it up by including a secondary dominant. So I've got D, F, A over here. If I need to find the 5th that's above D, which we actually did just now too, I can count 5 up of D. So in the key of A minor, and I get A as a starting point. So this might be kind of cool. And this is something that you might hear a lot also in different kinds of music that you listen to that's a little bit more playing with similar notes, but just making subtle variations in the different kinds of sounds. So let's go ahead and start on A. In this case, let's start from up and then we'll drop it back down. So here's A, here is C sharp, and here is E, because that is what you need to form an A major chord. So check this out. And this sounds a little bit strange because it's so high up, so let's drop it down an octave. Now, if this doesn't sound completely like sound at the moment because, you know, we've got a minor chord immediately followed by a major chord, sometimes it's kind of like jarring to the ear. Oftentimes, secondary dominant chords also have a 7th note in them. And Max did a really excellent stream about 7ths before. So you can check that out on the 343 Labs TV channel, our YouTube channel. But in the meantime, let's just also talk a little bit about 7th notes before we get back to this over here. I'm also going to color this a different color so that I can be aware of like the different kinds of chord progressions that I have. And oh yeah, Ashok, no problem. Yeah, so this is going to be the last session of this season of 343 TV. So make sure that if you do want to come back for more Ashok, like you said, make sure to subscribe so that you can be notified of whenever we start season 2 again. So in the meantime, though, I'm going to color these differently. Great, did that. And let's do these differently as well. Boop, there we go. So now I've got this different one. If I head back to my version 1, which Scott mentioned also just now, remember we had this in the key of D minor. So I have these secondary dominants over here, or this one really. This one's just like a main sort of dominant. But if I need to create a different version of this, I probably need to add like a 7th to it. Well, not a different version, but like a 7th note. So I've got G, not G, excuse me. I got A, C sharp, and E over here. So that means if I wanted to create some kind of dominant 7th with this chord, I would have to add a G to it. So it has this kind of like a little bit of a suspenseful kind of sound in a way. But let's add that G in and let's see how that feels for us. So it's also kind of resolving in a way. It might work better if we drop this down an octave. So let's try this out. And if it doesn't work, we can also just move it back up. So that's the beauty of this. Cool. Yeah, and that's really what a lot of the resolution comes from too. Having that additional seventh really adds a lot to that as well. So let's go ahead and let's add a seventh to this E major chord too. So E major is our secondary dominant in this case. If I wanted to add a seventh to this chord and make it a dominant seventh chord, I'd be adding a D. So that's what I will be adding to this chord. Let's put that in here. Here we go. And, oh yeah, Holgi, no problem as well. Yeah, the great thing about all of our episodes, which I love a lot personally, is that they are all replayable. Some people don't let their live streams be replayed, but our live stream is replayable over here, which is great. So let's take a listen to this. Cool. So kind of going back to this idea of the dominant sevenths, if I wanted to go back to my second chord progression, maybe we need a little help from this too. So my second chord now is A, C sharp E, which coincidentally we just dealt with. So A, C sharp E, we can add in G to become a dominant seventh. So let's do that. So we had our first chord progression and then we had our second chord progression. Both of these have secondary dominants in them. But let's play this one. So this is gonna be our key. Ooh, whoops, it's gonna be this one. Second one is an A minor. So A minor chord progression. Here we go. So we are still kind of getting, some kind of momentum over here between the second and the third chord. So that's pretty neat. What I will do also, though, is drop all of this collectively down an octave because I'm playing very high on my keyboard. But let's play this back again. So again, A minor. Here is our A minor chord progression with a secondary dominant as the second chord. Secondary dominant. And you know what? Just to kind of drive home the point that I mentioned just now, let's go ahead and make this 5 chord. Let's make that a major chord too. So cool. So kind of like dealing with all of these other quote unquote out of key kinds of sounds. Ooh, Scott said inverted seventh sounds good on the third chord. I'm guessing that you might mean the first version of the chord progression. But yeah, let's see. Cool. So here is our first version of that chord progression. Ooh, I also turned on my draw mode by accident. But here we go. So I'm not sure exactly what you mean by inverted seventh. Scott, sometimes when we say inverted seventh, we sometimes mean that it's on the bottom. So that is actually an inverted seventh. But if we're bringing it down just by an octave, then usually we just say it's down by an octave. But yeah, I do like how this one's a little bit lower. Also, because if you listen out for the top note, that top note is much closer to this note than it was before. So it's flowing a lot more smoothly and it's more well voice led. The voice leading is a little bit better, which is something that Max also talked about previously too. So it's all in the streams that he's mentioned before. Let's go back to this one though. So I've got this. And in a lot of chord progressions, double click the spacebar. In a lot of chord progressions that I try to experiment with, usually if I have a seventh in one chord, I try to see what could happen if I also had sevenths in other chords. So for example, I've got an A minor chord here to start off with. If I wanted to create a minor seventh, since the root of the main quality of this chord is a minor chord, G is going to help me with that. So I'm going to put in a G over here. Let's move on to the 4 chord over here, which is a D minor chord. If I wanted to create some kind of minor 7th out of this chord, then my 7th note would be C, because that's in the key of D minor. So let's put a C over there. And now my last chord, so that we can get 7ths out of all of these, we've got E, G sharp, and B, because this is the major dominant version of this. So then my dominant 7th would include the D at the top as well. So let's see how this sounds with all of the 7th. Oh my goodness, whoops. I can't see notes. Cool. I have all of these windows up here for streaming stuff, but that's all right. Here we go. Here's our new chord progression with all of the 7ths. Also, here's a neat tip. I was also sharing this with one of my students earlier today, but if you have a lot of notes in Live and you're kind of scrolling up and down in your MIDI note editor, one really great way of being able to see all of them and zoom in to have them all fit is to select all of them by pressing Control A or Command A in Live. And then if you hover over the left-hand side of the MIDI note editor with the magnifying glass, and if you double click on that, it'll zoom to fit. So that's a really neat thing. I feel like people underutilize the zooming features of Live, but I love zooming differently. Hello to Greenman. Welcome to the chat. I think it might be your first time here. Yeah, this is Ableton Live. So it is a software that we commonly use here at 343 Labs, because 343 Labs is an Ableton Certified Training Center. And there's 4 Ableton CTs that are there. There's myself, there's Max, our co-founder, and then there's Atropolis and Josh Bess, and all of us are teaching online now at 343 Labs, which is very fun. But we're also doing streams, so that's the other fun part about it too. But of course, like, you could do this in pretty much any software. So I'm using Live. I also use Logic, and I'm certified in Logic too. I also use Bitwig. I have a giant poster on my wall. I'm also certified in Bitwig too. But yeah, you could pretty much use any software for this as long as it has some capabilities of showing you maybe like a MIDI piano roll. You wouldn't necessarily be able to do this, say, in Audacity, which is also a different kind of audio editing program, but that really just deals with audio. It doesn't really have MIDI capabilities yet. But I love Audacity, though. It was actually my first workstation in a way. Won't go into too much detail for that, but it's a really great program. I still love using it today. But yeah, we've got this over here. Oops, let's play this back again. And yeah, so for me, generally, I do feel whenever I have a 7th in one chord, I do find it helpful to have like other tensions or extensions in that same chord too. And that's also another topic that Max has talked about in previous weeks too. That's it though. I think it might be nice to not just hear the metronome against this. Maybe let's put in some kind of drums. So I'm just going to create a new MIDI track over here. That's Control-Shift-T or Command-Shift-T on a Mac or a PC, depending on what you have. And let's pop over to the drums section over here. And I'm just going to grab maybe a classic sort of 909 kit. Let's put that over here. Very common house dance music kind of drum kit. And let's do a quick drum pattern. So double clicking in any empty clip slot to create a new clip, and double clicking to create some new notes. So here we go. Let's do like a 4 on the floor. Bring the volume down so that I don't kill anybody's ears. Sorry if anything's been really loud. I try to manage volume so that it like protects your ears a little bit. But let's add in some claps also. And let's do, where are my hats? Great. So let's just put in some open ones over here. Double click, double click, double click. And let's do some closed ones as well. Maybe use pencil 2 for this one. But great. And boop, there we go. So now here's our drum sound with it. Cool. This is much better because then we don't have to kind of, keep playing with the metronome. It's nice to have some drum grooves to accompany you. You're most welcome, Greenwood. So yeah, we currently got this going. We've got this secondary dominant thing happening. Usually, though, for a lot of secondary dominant chord progressions or chord progressions that involve secondary dominants, because you're going to get a lot of these different shapes, I do find it really important to try adding some proper voice leading. So right now, what does exactly mean to voice lead something? This is a term that I threw around earlier on in the stream. I didn't talk about it then, but I think I will now, just to reiterate that whenever you're dealing with different kinds of chords, because we're always starting on different notes, your chords may go further up than is the most, like, the easiest to hear and the most comfortable to listen to. So because of that, it might be in our best interest to create a smoother sounding type of chord progression by making most of the notes stay around the same note range. So what I'm going to do over here is drop down these top notes over here, and I can select these by clicking in the MIDI note editor and dragging across them, and then pressing shift and the down arrow key, and that drops them down. So now they're all in much closer proximity, which is pretty neat. Let's take a listen to this now. Also, I think I'm going to undo that actually, but I'll make a copy of that so that we can compare the voice-led version versus the unvoice-led version. So let's actually do this instead. Shift more of these notes down. Great. So here is version 1. Nothing wrong with it, but let's hear version 2. And in this case, I'm even thinking some more about this. I liked how this chord progression went, but truly, when it got pretty low, things got a little bit wompy, and I use the word wompy a lot, but really what I'm referring to is muddy. And it's just because it was a term that I started using with a lot of my younger students, because they would imitate the sound of like whoom, boom, boom, and it's getting wompy. So with all of these wompy notes at the bottom, let's just move them back up. So we'll change the inversions more, change a little bit more of the voice leading. But no, this might be kind of nice. Let's take a listen to how this sounds. And you know what? This is kind of nice. Why? Because if you listen to the top note motion especially, these 3 chords all share the same top note. So all of them are kind of like leaning into each other and being continuous. And then we have a nice change over here at the last chord. It's like, oh, here's something a little bit different right before we head back to the 1 chord. So it's a pretty interesting way of seeing motion work as far as visualizations go of chords. So you've got the same thing, the same thing, the same thing, and then a nice change. And that's usually what we go for a lot in music too. That's, for me personally, in my experience, that's what I've found has made the best chord progressions in a way. Chord progressions that are somehow able to be a little bit similar to each other, but with a little bit of variation at the end just to switch things up. Ian, hi to Ian. Ian's a dear friend of mine. Thanks so much for tuning in, Ian. Amazing producer, amazing sound designer. Well, Ian and I went to school together, and this was something that most people at our school had to learn. I'm wondering if you remember secondary dominant chords, Ian. Oh gosh. It was a huge part of our curriculum at one point. But yeah, this is kind of what you're listening to. You've got a normal 7th chord, then you've got the secondary dominant of this chord, and then you've got this last big 5 chord going back to the 1. So because of that, it still ends up sounding like it's coming home, which is pretty neat. So cool. So we've got that going. Let's try to use one more example, because we've currently dealt with, at least 2 different kinds of chord progressions. What if we're in a major key? That would be kind of fun. So now if, I know we might have a couple of different people in the chat because the numbers are always switching around, but in the YouTube chat, everyone, if I could get a suggestion for maybe a major key to use, since this time we did a minor key. We did 2 minor keys actually. We did D minor from Scott, and then we did A minor from me. So let's get a major key in the YouTube chat if we can. I'm just gonna hang out. Maybe I'll fine tune like the drums a little bit while seeing if anyone has a suggestion for a major key. And make a couple of these sounds a little different. Adjust, adjust, adjust. I do so much of this fine tuning like on the fly. That's like, oh, okay, cool. Great. So I'm also gonna rename these here too. Any suggestions for a major key in the YouTube chat? Let's see. I know that there's always a little bit of a delay also, so I might just be talking to myself right now, which is fine. Used to talking to myself. Oh, yes, Ian. Tritone substitutes all day for days and days and days. Cool. So we've got a new clip over here. Let's maybe color it purple instead. Ooh, Ian, thank you. Let's do B flat. So we'll do a B flat major chord progression. So that's going to be our B flat major chord. It's funny. I have to kind of like look at my keyboard out of one corner of the eye and then look at this over here. But let's do that. Let's do B flat. And in the case of live, anything that's usually a sharp, a flat is spelled out as a sharp. So in this case, B flat is actually A sharp. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do maybe like a simple one, like a 1, 5, 6, 4 type thing. So we can do 1 over here. Let's do that. And again, I'm going to shift my grid so that it ends up being in bar longs. Cool. So whoops. Let's also make this 4 bars long. Great. So we got this over here. Here's our B flat, D, and then F over here. Let's do this, and then let's do 1, 5. So bring that all the way up. Here's our 5. And then let's do a 6. But the 6 is not a major, it's a minor. And then let's also drag this over here. Drag that down. Cool. So we got 1, 5, 6, 4. And also that was very, very quick. Cool. Right, so classic kind of situation where maybe we hear something that sounds pretty similar. If anyone's heard this tune before, or this chord progression before, you've probably heard it in like thousands of songs. And if anyone's interested, maybe you want to check out Axis of Awesome to see that relationship. So between this chord progression and all of the other songs that you might have heard out in the world. Greenman just had a question. Relationship with Re major is C. I'm not super sure what you are talking about, Greenman, but if you want to expound on that a little bit and elaborate on what you mean, that would be great, and I'll try to get back to you. But in the meantime, we've got this over here. Great. Let's try doing some secondary dominant stuff for the ending over here, maybe. Like we're ending on this 4 chord, which is a E flat major chord, or D sharp major, if you're looking at the D sharp sign as a starting point. So let us go ahead and delete this chord over here. So now we got this. It's kind of empty. Something. Cool. So you got this chord progression. Let's fill out a secondary dominant over here. And just notice Greenwood said relative major is C, or is that too boring? Oh, it's not too boring. It's just like we already had another suggestion of a key. So you might be lagging a little bit in time in the broadcast, possibly. You just want to make sure that you're viewing live in real time if you like me to like get the suggestions. But Ian already had a suggestion for B flat, so that's what we are currently in at the moment. Let's continue with our B flat. But if I want to do a secondary dominant in B flat for this final chord over here, that's E flat, that is actually going to start on a B flat chord as well. So what should we do? In this case, B flat major is already the key. Oh no, but that's okay. We can still create one if we have that dominant 7th. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to show you a trick, or not really a trick, but the usual way that we do this, which I showed you just now. And that's to create a copy of the chord and then start it on the 5th. So now we got this. which almost sounds like it's 1, 5, 1, 4. So 1, 5, 1, 4. And not to say that that's bad, but if we do want to make this a secondary dominant, then we need our dominant 7. So we have B flat, D, and F. If I wanted to make this B flat major chord a dominant 7th, I would have to add in one more note to form that 7th. And that's going to be this over here. That's an A flat, or in live, if you're looking at the piano roll, that's going to be G sharp. So let's add that in. Let's add in our G sharp. G sharp. There we go. So now we'll have this. Which sounds a little bit crazy, so let's go ahead and voice this a little better. Let's drop that down by an octave. And we may change the voicing of this second chord later too. I do also want to make this a little bit slower. So let's drop down the tempo to 120. Let's do the default. And let's take a listen again. See if we can hear this sound in our head. Dominant 7. So like I said, sometimes I do find it a little bit nice to add in, different kinds of variations for chords and different extensions if you already have a 7th in place. So let's go ahead and try that. Maybe for this first chord over here, this B flat. Maybe let's add in a 9th. So that would be C. Let's put in C at the top. Or we can also put it like at the bottom, can drop it down. Get that sort of tension. For now, let's put it at the top because I just want to make this fairly straightforward for now. And then we've got F here. Let's do the F dominant 7th. So and then let's do another 9th over here as well. So we'll have an F on the top. Let's find the F. Where's the F? Cool. And again, this is something that Max goes into in greater detail in a couple of his other streams, so please keep an eye out for that. But yeah, this is kind of what it is. We've got... and we have all of these other more interesting tensions. Let's voice this a little bit better too, though. And maybe this, I know that our time is kind of like running out, but let's voice this a little better. Gonna make a copy of it. And here we go. In the second clip, we're going to see if we can move everything down into the same octave as most of the parts are in. So again, our quick trick, highlight everything that might seem out of stuff and just press Shift and the down arrow key to move them downwards. So now we have something that is like this. Cool. So we have a secondary dominant over here in the third chord, and it's actually very similar to the first chord, like I said, but we're still able to get, different kinds of feelings because of the different additional notes that are in that chord. So I think what might be nice now to do is maybe not necessarily do a different chord progression, but just soften this out a little bit. The piano is really neat, but I'm wondering how this could sound like with maybe a nice pad. So I'm going to look in my sounds category. Let's grab a pad that is kind of nice. Let's do there's one that I was just using with one of my students actually. That was, I think it might have been this, possibly. Let's try this out. Yes, it was this. Now I remember. Also, I think it has wavetable in it. I think that's why I was talking about it with another student of mine. No problem. Let's find a different instrument. So just as a heads up, everyone, the reason why I reacted to that so quickly was because my CPU was going a little crazy, and it usually tends to because I keep my buffer size very low for live streaming. So let's find a pad from Operator instead, which is a little bit less intensive. So, oh yeah, also that was one of my favorites that I put in my collections. So maybe this is a little better. Yeah. Cool. But yeah, you can really hear that motion kind of go down. If I wanted to make this a little bit more, say, how should I say this? A little bit more subtle in terms of its motion and in terms of the way that things are changing between chords, I could also move this last note up here down an octave. So this way, my top note of all of my chords is actually the same. So I've got the same tension across. And it might seem a little bit more cohesive depending on whether I want it to sound cohesive or a little bit different. So now we got this. Yeah, so more of like a positive, uplifting sort of thing, very calm. You're not getting a lot of changes on the top line, but otherwise everything is really smooth. And this is really pretty much all that there is to a lot of dealing with secondary dominant chords, being able to incorporate them into your music. You're really just thinking about a fifth above any other chord that you want to make. And you're thinking about how to also add in a seventh. Usually the seventh helps a lot to make that a dominant chord that moves to another subsequent chord. So I'm wondering if there are also any questions in the chat. I'll put this out now because I know that there's a little bit of delay. So if anyone has any questions, please put them in the YouTube chat. Happy to check them out. Also just saw that we had a lot of people just join in, but we're actually about to wrap up. But yeah, thanks so much everyone for tuning in. We really appreciate all of you staying with us on this 343 Labs journey with 343 TV, and we will be back eventually. If you do want to be notified for whenever we have season 2, which could be sooner than you think, as a little bit of a hint, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and don't forget to also like us. If you want to, you can also follow me on my own platforms. I also run a YouTube channel. You can find me as lowercase dolltr exclamation point CK. And that's where I host a lot of other tutorials as well. I live stream over there too. And I also do a lot of things related to live, but also related to Logic, related to Bitwig, other kinds of software as well. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. It's been really fun hosting my usual Monday show, which is tips and tricks, but also hanging out with all of you for the Theory Thursdays. And usually, like I said, Max runs this. So please go ahead and check out his other episodes too. I love watching his streams and the way that he breaks down a lot of the basic concepts about major chords versus minor chords. So those are some of the 343 Labs Theory Thursdays streams that you'll find in like the playlist and on the rest of our YouTube channel. But yeah, thanks so much everyone for tuning in. It's been really fun just hanging out with all of you and seeing how we've evolved. I think in the very first Theory Thursdays stream, Max spoke about like just major chords and what is a major chord. But here we are. We're talking about secondary dominant chords, seventh chords, adding in tensions and all of that. So yeah, I guess this is probably where we'll wrap up today if no one has any questions. My eye's on the chat, and it's been a while. So if no one has any questions, thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Once again, my name's Claire. I'm also an instructor at 343 Labs, Ableton Certified Trainer, and I hope to see you all again soon. This was really fun. I'm going to miss all of you. So until we get to meet again next time, have a great rest of the week and see all of you soon. Bye. See you soon.
Broken skin has become my memory. Wounded heart has me falling to my knees. Blinded eyes are in search of reverie. Tell me, do I deserve my dignity? Forgotten shields across the fields, once grown There's a battleground brewing